all saw the shift to the South and West when the 2010 census data was released a couple of days ago. So what does this mean for the political landscape, especially with a major election coming up in about 2 years? Our political panel is here to weigh in. Democratic strategist and former Clinton advisor Bernard Whitman is here. Say hi, Bernard.
Hey, Bernard.
Thank you. Democratic strategist Robert Zimmerman's here. Robert, you can say hi later. And economics reporter for the Wall Street Journal, Kelly Evans. First off, let's go to you, Robert. What does this mean? Texas wins, Georgia picks up some steam, as well as Arizona, Nevada, South Carolina, and Utah. They all pick up seats. Washington gained 1 seat.
Look, this is fantasy baseball for political pundits. And if you're a lawyer, it's like winning the lottery because 40 states during reapportionment, last time it happened 10 years ago, went to court. So it's a big win for lawyers. Here's the reality, though. Yes, obviously, the argument's going to be made this is an advantage for Republicans. But remember, the new population shifts were driven by key Democratic demographics, primarily the growing Hispanic community and also suburban regions.
And Kelly, look who lost. New York loses. Massachusetts loses. New Jersey loses. Missouri, Michigan as well, Illinois, Iowa, Louisiana, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania each lost a member of Congress, of the House.
And looking at those states, it sort of, to me, shows the broader trend that's taking place in the U.S. right now, which is slowing population growth in some of the traditional places and slowing population growth in general. You know, the population grew about 10% in the last decade. That was the slowest pace since the 1930s. It's likely to slow down even further next decade because a lot of that, about 40%, was driven by immigration. And at this point, we're seeing that trend slow a little bit. The economy isn't quite as good. So, yeah, while we're seeing some shift internally into states, for example, that are usually more heavily red, I think there's a broader question here as to how much the U.S. going forward can continue to fund itself when it doesn't have that kind of population.
And I think you guys did not bring up another issue. People are running from taxes. It's very hard to start a business in New York, in New Jersey, and in Massachusetts these days, Bernard.
Well, Brian, the truth is the South and West have literally gained 1 congressional seat a year for the last 80 years. So this idea that somehow the flood of voters are going down South and West because of the differences in tax structure is just not true. This has been an 80-year trend, but the impact of the census redistricting is going to be a mixed bag. Why? Because much of these gains have been driven by Hispanics. If you look at Texas, they gained 4 congressional seats. 2 of those seats will likely be Hispanic districts. And you look at the loss in New York, one of those is going to squeeze out a Republican in Western New York, and one's going to squeeze out a Democrat in the city.
But, you know, while neither party can take the Hispanic constituency for granted, as long as the Republican right wing choose to demonize the Hispanic community by voting against the DREAM Act and killing the DREAM Act, which protects children who were born in this country from undocumented workers.
So you're pro-DREAM Act, but I don't think Republicans are anti-Hispanic. That's how you're choosing to portray it.
Absolutely.
But Kelly,
absolutely.
let me just ask you this. In this big picture, with so many Republicans focusing on the state houses and state legislatures, this is really going to benefit in 2010.
Meaning the benefits
2012, yeah.
Exactly. It's going to take a little bit for this to feed through, both because of the legal wrangling that we mentioned is going to happen with a lot of the redistricting, and just the matter as to when a lot of these congressmen actually become. It's not until, I want to say, 2011, 2012 Congress, and again, the presidential election. When
remember the balancing act here, because while, yes, Republicans have made gains in state houses, you still have the Voting Rights Act, which is somewhat of a check and balance, and you also have other states like Illinois, where there were 9 Republican Congress members in districts that voted for Barack Obama, and the Democrats control the reapportionment process there.
But here's the critical untold story of this, is the American people are going to react very badly to any attempts to gerrymander these new districts. And my concern for the Republicans is they will not be able to resist, as they tried in Pennsylvania and ultimately failed. I think that this is going to speed the call for nonpartisan redistricting. It may happen in New York, New York uprising, and Governor-elect Cuomo has supported that. And we need to increase the number of states that are redistricting on a nonpartisan basis.
Ask Tom DeLay how well it worked to overreach on reapportionment.
Stay right there. We'll leave it there. We've got to talk more about this. Our panel is sticking around to discuss this issue, a list that they've put together, and they're checking it twice. Which politicians were naughty and which ones were nice this year, according to them. All right, Steve, 23 minutes after the hour. 2010, as 2010 comes to a close, our political panel is here to decide who's been naughty and who's been nice in their eyes. Joining us still, we got Democratic strategist Bernard Whitman, Democratic strategist Robert Zimmerman, and not a Democratic strategist, Kelly Evans. Kelly, let's start with you. Who's been naughty?
Well, on the naughty list, I picked the former budget director, Peter Orszag. He stepped down in July and just recently announced he was taking a position at Citigroup, which, as we know, exists today basically because of a massive infusion of taxpayer money. And look, I'm not disparaging his personal decision. The guy's only 41. He's relatively young. There probably aren't a lot of great options.
He's got to make some money, right?
Right. But the problem is he becomes such an easy target for anyone looking and saying, you know, the cozy relationship between Wall Street and Washington, you know, he kind of just played right into their
hands. Why do you think he got hired? Maybe he got some good access there?
Good
you still got the number?
Exactly.
All right, let's go to Robert. Robert, who's on your naughty list?
Too easy this time. Mitch McConnell.
Why?
Why did he go to the Dick Cheney School of Charm and Bipartisanship? You know, the country's demanding action. The country's demanding bipartisanship. And he is almost chortling over the way he wants to be more partisan and chortling over how he wants to bring Obama's presidency down. Most recently in Politico yesterday, he said that he's going to make it even create more angst for the Democrats next year. Let's get the job done.
I was surprised he wouldn't be on your nice list because he was the one who came by and said, let's cut a deal, Mr. President, and gave him some much-needed momentum. He gave him a respirator for his political career.
And then he stood up against Don't Ask, Don't Tell, against the START Treaty, stood up against the DREAM Act, and several of his old members walked away from him because of his extreme positions.
But I think a lot of it was the speed in which it was put up and the lame duck session when the country truly stood up and said,
how many years was this being debated?
I don't know.
These issues.
Let's, Bernard, move on. Who is the tops of your naughty list?
There's no question it's Senator John McCain. Why? His singular, steadfast, and stubborn resistance to overturning Don't Ask, Don't Tell make an absolute mockery of the maverick that he seemingly once was many, many years ago.
Right.
I mean, the truth is, he has become the epitome of the old, tired party apparatus that he once used to rail against. He is a maverick only when it suits himself.
Right.
And on top of his opposition to Don't Ask, Don't Tell, he voted against the DREAM Act, which he co-sponsored for 3 years in a row.
Well, I think the DREAM Act has been nuanced and massaged. It looks a lot different now than it used to. But would you also say that very few people in the Senate have better contacts with the military than John McCain? Would you say that?
I would not agree with that. He is completely out of touch. If you look at the survey...
You know people with better contacts in the military than John McCain?
If you look at the survey that was done of the American military, the vast majority said, we don't care. It's time to overturn the policy. But John McCain is so entrenched in his vision of America from the 50s and 60s that he can't get out of his own way.
I guess you didn't see Marine Commandant James Conway, who knows the Marines are doing most of the battle, who said, whatever you do, don't pass
I don't know. Mike Mullen and Defense Secretary Gates and many of the other service seats felt very differently.
But they're not fighting every day. The Marines are. All right, Kelly, let's talk about your nice list.
I picked Robert Grove, Census Director, who came in $1.6 billion under budget to conduct the 2010 census. You know, he doesn't get a lot of attention, but that's exactly the kind of what you want to see right now. We have a problem with the deficit. We have a problem with our debt long term. He comes in, basically saves 5 times as much money as when they conducted the census in 2000, even though he only had twice the budget. So I say, you know, again, people overlooked that and talking about the census as we did, but a great sign.
Under 50% vote, but 75% did the census. That's awesome. All right, Robert, who's on your nice list?
Absolutely easy choice this time. Barack Obama. I would use the word effective, and I would use the word leader as opposed to nice, because his lame duck session in Congress has really distinguished his presidency and has been the defining moment of his presidency.
So you love the lame duck session over the last 2 years. You just love the last week?
I think the actions that have been taken and the leadership he's shown over the last 2 weeks has truly distinguished him.
But he did leave the podium for your ex-boss, Bill Clinton, which I found fascinating. Bernard, nice list.
I'd have to say the 8 Republican senators that allowed Don't Ask, Don't Tell to finally get repealed, they bucked their party, they bucked John McCain, they bucked Lindsey Graham, they bucked Mitch McConnell, and these are the true heroes of the American people. Why? Because the American military is now stronger, more ready, morale's been enhanced by allowing gays and lesbians to serve openly in the military with honor and dignity.
Well, see, I just find it hard to believe that in a lame duck session, when only things should be due is flat-out emergency, Don't Ask, Don't Tell ended up putting under the emergency headline.
And it is an emergency because our national security has been jeopardized.
How come the military is not speaking about it? Politicians are. They talk more about that than they did about the war.
And it's because we have civilian control of our military. We lost 13,000 soldiers under this law at a time we're being stretched to the limits.
Right. Just too many seem to be saying, not now with 2 wars. We could pick a better time, and especially with Iraq winding down. Robert, great debate. Bernard and Kelly, great job. Have a great Christmas.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Great holiday.
All right, guys.